Okay, just double checking to make sure that everything is going smoothly here. One moment, please. Moment, please. Okay, so it looks like we are live. I'm just going to go ahead and put some notifications out in Discord. Okay. So, last week, where did we leave off? So anybody that was here knows that I was having a decent bit of trouble with this drive frame. It did not want, the M3x40 did not want to go all the way through and actually get into the preloaded nut. That's a part of the Y extrusion here. So last week, while I was mulling over what was going on, I noticed that this corner of the drive frame, both top and bottom, weren't fully seated. And I don't know how I didn't catch this while I was on stream, but there are little indexing tabs. You're probably not going to be able to make them out on stream, but little indexing tabs on the front of this rear extrusion as well as on the inside of this rear extrusion. And what those end up doing is adding a positive friction, kind of a snap into place whenever you get everything installed properly. And apparently I got that right on the B side, but did not get that right on the A side. So off stream, I figured that out, and I just went ahead and got this M3x40 fully threaded. And then something else that I noticed is I completely missed putting the rear Z extrusion on, or excuse me, the rear Z rail on. So I just decided to go ahead and correct that little mistake. And you know, now that I am looking at this, it actually looks as though I missed a couple of preloaded nuts as well. So I was hoping to prevent having to take this back apart any while on stream, but you know, looks like we're gonna have to. Hey Maple Leaf Makers, how's it going, bud? So just to get access to where I need to preload the nuts on this rear Z upright, I just have to undo the 3 screws at the bottom here, and we should be able to get right to it. And with all of my carefully made preparations, I completely forgot to grab my tools. Okay. So it's just 3 screws that hold this bottom plate on, and once these 3 screws are taken out, we'll be able to just put the nuts in this rear Z upright that we need to be able to mount a couple of things a little bit later on down the road. Actually, one of the things is a part of the center support for the gantry. Okay, and taking a look at this, it actually looks as though I used one of the wrong screws when putting that bottom piece on. So this bottom piece has a slot for an M310, which actually threads into the Z upright extrusion itself, and then there are two additional slots for M3x6, and these are just long enough to be able to thread into a captive M3 nut that's preloaded into the extrusion. So let's go ahead and get these nuts loaded in here. And then there's also going to need to be two on the bottom. And should also actually be two on the back that I seem to have completely missed. Good grief. Alright, so I know for a fact that a screw can actually be put into the center support for the gantry while it's assembled, but I don't know if I would be able to install any hex nuts there. So we will have to figure that part out. Alright, so that looks pretty well lined up. And indeed it is. So we'll let this one fall back here, and we'll line this one up as well. I think I put that one a little bit too far. Yep, too far. It's difficult to actually see what the heck is going on. This light casts a mean shadow with as far back as I've put it. It would also help if the tip of this hex wrench wasn't magnetized. There we go. Just went ahead and slotted that M36 in there just to keep that bolt from moving anymore. Nut, whatever. Just go ahead and tighten these down, not using the ball end of the ball end drive. So that's a bad idea. Okay. So we now have functional motor mounts, and I think we are ready to just go ahead and start moving on to, well, actually, why don't we go ahead and take some time to use a tool that I made to make setting up the rails easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that these are a little bit loose so that they can move forward and back. So it's pretty common for the Voron team to include something like this to make sure that you've got the proper sizes or proper offsets for your dry gears. And I mean, this is no exception. It's pretty important to have something like this all set up. And we've got, of course, the A and B motors, as well as a setup for the Z drive as well. But an extra feature of this is that it is 4 millimeters thick, which is the distance that you would want to have between all of your rails and the, I guess, end position for where they can go. Now, for the AB drives, this is the only one that's a little bit more difficult to get 100% lined up correctly, just because the fact that these bearings protrude a little bit over the actual surface, meaning that you can't actually use the little nubbin here that's designed to slot into the extrusion. So what you can do is the A side sits up just enough and in just enough that you can line this up against the drive, and I guess I need to loosen that up some more. There we go. Now we're moving. Line this up between carriage, or the rail and the drive frame. Wow. Apparently I am not as good at loosening screws as I thought I was. There we go. And yet another thing that I seem to have forgotten are my MGN7 alignment jigs. Which should be... Nope, not that one. Ah, that's right, I put those in with my motion sets. There we go. Hey, Ellie. Thanks for showing up, bud. How's the day going for you? Okay, so got that centered. Got that with the appropriate offset here. Just going to try to make sure that that offset is maintained while I screw this down. And you know, looking at this and actually using it in practice, I think I'm going to actually have to adjust this tool a little bit to make it a little bit easier to use. Ah. So now that I've got the majority of them started, I can take out that 4mm spacer. Okay, so that is one of the rails done. I'm going to move over to the other side, and I'm going to apologize if this isn't exactly the best angle for you guys. My vision is already bad, and it is not getting any better. So I need to make sure that I can really focus in on what I've got going on here. Oh, looks like I am missing an M2 there. We can worry about that later. Okay, so that is both of the Y rails set up here. I guess why don't we go ahead and get started on the idlers. So if you'll give me just a moment to find some of the necessary parts, we can get moving forward with that. And it also looks like I am going to need to check Discord because I'm getting a couple of pings there. Alright, so just 4 pieces, at least 4 printed parts, and then the rest of it is all going to be hardware, bearings, shims, and screws. Of course, we've already got the captured nuts there. It's been going alright. Found out Pandora's Box XY thingies are not the same with Pandora gantry mods, but okay. Yeah, the Pandora's Box gantry was a complete redesign, and realistically, what ended up really driving the Pandora's Box was one, I wanted to have a triple belted Z where the entire uh, belt run for each of the Z axes would stay out of the way of the tool head, and the gantry itself, uh, in order to accommodate that as well as the full build area, uh, really had to basically redesign the entire printer. Now, good news is I was able to reuse a vast majority of the V0 parts, um, uh, not including the four 300 millimeter uprights. You actually end up using uh, 2 or 3 fewer 200 millimeter extrusions from the like if you were to buy a bomb in a box for the V0. And most of the hardware is the same or can be reused. There are significantly more M3x6s and M3x10s, but both of those can actually end up being uh, swapped over to M3.8s in a lot of circumstances. Um, so let's see. Need to finish grabbing some hardware here. We can get started on assembling these idlers. Okay. Now, if I remember correctly, 340 is what I end up using here. But I'm actually a little bit shy of total number of button heads that I need, and since this is recessed over 3 millimeters anyway, I'm actually going to go ahead and dip into my socket head screws, as I've got an absolutely monstrous amount of those that I can go ahead and use and just kind of get through. Keep the button head screws for the tool head if at all possible. Alright, so big difference between Pandora's box and the V0 is that the belt path is a little odd. Uh, on a V0, the belt path along the Y rails between the inner belt run and the outer belt run is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 millimeters. If you look at the CAD for the V0 or the Pandora gantry, it is significantly less. If memory serves, it's going to be right around 1 or 2 millimeters, and that's it. And I don't know where I put my 330s. Oh, here they are. So, in order to accommodate this, the front idlers needed to have a two bearing system in order to make sure that the belt could be routed perpendicular to the X motion for the printer as well. And this is important because if the path is not perpendicular to the X motion or parallel to the orientation of the Y axis, you actually end up getting differences in travel depending on where your tool head is in on the Y axis. So the belt coming from the drive frames comes on the outside here, wraps around this back bearing, wraps in between these two bearings, and then comes out on this side here, leading a very, very small gap between the belts as they run along that path. Now they don't touch, and I've done a decent amount of testing to make sure that one, this wasn't going to add any additional issues with overall rigidity of the axis. As a matter of fact, initial testing of the Pandora gantry with some friendly folks on the Voron Discord actually indicated that the gantry, as it was designed, yielded slightly better results with an accelerometer as opposed to what the stock V0 would offer. So that is the A idler out of the way. Let's go ahead, keep trucking along, and get this B idler set up here. And I'm sure this isn't going to be too much of an issue, but I always do my best, since most of the time these shims are going to be stamped. There's going to be one side that has raised edges or micro burrs, whatever you want to call them, and I do my best to make sure that the smooth side is going to be the side that's facing the bearing, because you want those raised edges or micro burrs or whatever, again, you want to call them, going towards the plastic so that they can actually dig in to make sure that the shim is working as designed. So here for both sides, we've got an M340 that goes through the back here, passes all the way through, and will end up going into a captured nut in the extrusion. And then this front one is an M3x30, again, on both sides, and this is just threading into plastic. I did mention in the last stream that I did that this was a bit of a common theme throughout a lot of the design of Pandora, is that there is a decent amount of just threading into plastic. And part of that was due to the constraints of size. Just the overall footprint of the printer itself is really small. All of the printed parts, aside from probably the feet, do everything that they can to absolutely maximize the usable space. And a lot of times you don't end up with enough room for a heat set insert or a hex nut to be actually captured by the printed part. So the best solution that I was able to find to this was to completely forego any of that concern and just decide to use a lot of threading into plastic. And again, this is something that has already been tested, not a big concern as far as rigidity or longevity of the parts. Uh, Everything here has worked out pretty darn good so far. Now, the screw that I just put in this little notch right here is an M3 8, and that just threads into a captive nut. And running into the first little bit of an issue with the socket head here is the Allen key is a lot less forgiving when it comes to being inserted here. So you have to excuse me while I muddle through getting this screwed in. I think I actually need to loosen this and realign just to be 100% certain that it's actually going in there. Yep, it definitely wasn't. That's why. Try this again. So I'm guessing those of you that are here probably came directly after the Voron Live, since I did kind of have to start afterwards. Of course, I wanted to see what was going on, and I'm sure the majority of you wanted to see what was going on too. Anybody else out there excited for TAP? Oh, daggone it. I think I'm going to end up having to start that rear one first. Oh, it is started. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's it was actually the very first thing uh, that I started looking into after joining the Voron Discord, and this was still before I had finished building my first Voron. I was still using my Ender 3 V2 kitted out with an MGN 12 and Stealth Burner, and I was trying to do something really similar. Actually, the early designs that were showed off were strikingly similar to the some of the designs that I had initially come up with, and I'm a little upset that I brought this up to. I mean, and I understand why they didn't say anything, but I'm a little upset that I brought this up to Wiley and was discussing it with him for a little bit of time, and he didn't really mention or indicate anything about, oh yeah, we've already tried that. That didn't work. Instead, he just kind of let me continue on with the same sort of thing that they had already done, already tried, and determined to not work. And the very first thing that I noticed whenever Bad Noob showed off Tap for the first time, whenever he went around to the back, I immediately noticed that there was a 50 millimeter MGN9 rail there, which was actually something that I joked about putting in my design, but never really actually got around to it. I ended up actually shelving that design uh, before doing any additional looking into it. I just kind of assumed that it was outside of my capabilities at the time. And fair enough. I mean, I was 100% spot on. It was definitely outside of my capabilities. Uh, because there's no way that I would have come up with a design as functional nor as good looking as the one that the design team come up with. Okay, so at the front here, we're working on putting in an M36 into a preloaded nut here. If this M36 would cooperate with me, there we go. And now that I've got the M36 cooperating and it's in the way of the hex nut. I'm just gonna put this out there. I love the iFixit kit. The magnetic bits are really, really nice. And yes, I know LTT screwdriver, blah, 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 blah. I've already got this. I'm not interested in something super bulky, as I do a wide range of projects, and the iFixit kit has everything that I've needed so far. So I don't see the need to go out and spend $70 on a new screwdriver. And I don't put that too far. You know what? Just for the sake of simplifying this process, sure. Nope, too small. Okay. Ahead and get that lined up here. Or don't get it lined up at all. Yeah, the shadow that this light is casting on these parts is making it very difficult to see what I'm actually doing here. So, Maple Leaf Makers, if memory serves, you ended up getting the contributor tag not too awful long ago, didn't you? I'm curious as to whether or not this was something that was opened up for beta testing for all contributors, or if this was something that was only released to a specific subset. And again, referencing tab. No, I'm starting to think that an M36 just isn't the right length for this. I'm thinking that M36 is on the newer design. Oh, yeah. So, a big part of why the GitHub page for this design is still so much in shambles uh, is because I'm still actively working on this design. I'm noticing a few different things that I don't like or that need changing. Uh, One of which is going to be the cable channel that I designed for the uh, gantry wiring. Uh, I just initially I really liked the design that I had settled on, but looking at it more and more, I'm realizing that it's aesthetic to an extent. It's functional, but it seems like it's going to be something that's going to be a little cumbersome to get started, especially if you have an umbilical that's pre-wired with something like the toolhead PCB, the 14 pin 7 by 2 microfits. That just isn't going to end up working on something like this, or something like this. So the idea is to have the wires pass through here around the back of the extrusion and then be fed down next to where the belt is on the outlet here. And that's nowhere, it's fully enclosed. I'm not a big fan of the way that it turned out, and I am going to end up redesigning this part specifically just for the fact that it's cumbersome, it's ugly, it doesn't exactly fit the ideas that I had for this printer. So with the idlers and the drive frames installed, we can actually go ahead and take off these rubber stoppers because they're no longer needed. And as I'm sure that you can see, there's a little bit of a gap between the back of the rail and the motor mount and the front of the rail and the idler. And that's by design. This is the way that Pandora's box, as well as Pandora, are able to achieve more than 120 millimeters of travel on the Y and Z axis. The B axis or the X axis is going to be a little bit different, and we're actually ready for that now. So again, if you'll excuse me while I grab some extra parts that we are going to need. So we are going to need a 200 millimeter MGN9. You can use MGN9H or MGN9C, whichever you'd prefer. I went with MGN9H just because that's what I had kicking around. I bought the remaining stock of MGN9 silver rails from Deep Fried Hero back whenever that was for sale. and I accidentally broke one, and that's actually a big part of where this design come from, is me breaking a linear rail and needing to find a way to actually use it. Okay, so these are all of the major parts that you need for this. Of course, you need bearings, shims, things of that nature. And I mentioned a minute ago, well, more than a minute ago, that there was a redesign for the gantry coming. And that's due to an offset between the AB motor mounts and the AB idlers to the XY joints. So the issue is with the XY joints and the fact that the rails or the carriages sit on top of the Y rails now. Uh, the measurement from the extrusion to the top of the bearing block is going to be roughly 8.1 millimeters, uh, within some amount of tolerance that I don't remember off the top of my head. And for anyone that's been a part or read the documentation on how a Voron part should be sliced or printed, you're supposed to use a 0.2 millimeter layer height. And that's the way that all of these parts were designed, but somehow I missed the fact that there was a zero point 0.1 millimeter. So the height of the drive frames and the idlers were both set as 12.1 millimeters for the A side and 21.9 millimeter or 21.1 millimeters for the B belt path. Uh, and that's not a that's not divisible by 0.2 millimeters. So that's a dummy me mistake, and I almost made another dummy me mistake. So what's important to remember on the left side for the AB or the XY joints is that there are two M2 holes to mount to the carriage that will be basically inaccessible once the bearing is installed. And they are still accessible enough that you can get uh, an Allen key in here and just kind of snug them up. They don't really need to be Hulk tight by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something to remember that for the left side specifically, the one that's got the uh, A bearing on the bottom middle, you want to go ahead and preload the first two or the front two uh, M2 by 6, and these can be button head, and they do sit just a hair proud, but not enough that they're going to be impacting the bearings or anything along those lines. So with all of that prep work out of the way, we should be ready to go ahead and get started in prepping the rest of the parts here. So I'm sure you guys are already aware on how to build a bearing stack, so I'm not going to go over it with you. but just the one at the front, the one at the rear, and then there's an additional M3 25 that goes all the way through the very back, and then actually threads into a heat set insert on the bottom part. Okay, and then we just go ahead, make sure that these M2s are not going to fall out, or the shims, or the M2s. Yeah, so this part is a little more taxing, a little bit more difficult, but the other side is significantly easier just for the fact that you don't have to worry about preloading these two M2 screws. And the part that is making this most difficult is the fact that I designed such small clearances into the parts to reduce the amount of play that you would have along the between the top and the bottom of the XY joint. And I don't know that it would have had a major effect. That's something that I really didn't test thoroughly in previous experiences. The design for the uh, gantry that was actually tested by myself and a couple of other people in the V0 user mod section, that was done with a little bit more uh, play on the diameter for the holes that the screws pass through. And again, so we're threading into plastic for these front two, so you just want to get them touching so that you don't have any play in the bearings. And then this back one is threading into a heat set insert. And I'm throwing parts now. Okay, so grab me another 4 more bearings, and this one's just going to go together a decent bit easier because you can do this side 100% upside down. I mean, until you need to start threading things. So build the bearing stacks, and then it just sandwiches together. Also, helping in contributor all had access to it. That's awesome. Maybe I should have applied to be a part of the helping role back when we were talking about that. All right, and just gonna go ahead and get those touching. Tighten that down till the head's touching. Get this back one snug down. And then this one actually threads a decent bit into plastic in this design, so give me just a second to get through this. I've made adjustments to the updated gantry that I'm going to be pushing to the GitHub as soon as I finish the AB motor mounts. Because I've got the idlers and the XY joints completed, I just need to finish updating the AB motor mounts. Okay, so these guys are done. And the next thing that we are going to want to do is get some screws and nuts all set up on our MGN9. Again, like I said, MGN9H or MGN9C will both work for this. I've got carriage designs for both available on the GitHub repo, and it really shouldn't matter which one that you go with. There's no more or less travel depending on which one you decide to go with. So I went with MGN9H because it's what I had lying around. Wait a minute, are these M38s or M36s? I think these are M36s. Yep, these are M36s. Whoops. Do I have any button head M3 or socket head M38s over here? Not looking like it. Okay, so unfortunately I ended up using the last of my M3 socket heads on a switch wire that I'm building for my brother for Christmas. So I do not have any extras in my stock to pull from at the moment. No big deal. These button heads will do just fine. Oh, something that I don't think I even mentioned in the last stream. Uh, there is a distinct lack of any sort of music or anything along those lines. And while I could set up stream beats or something similar, I actually prefer that if you do want some background music, you can just load up something that you enjoy. Personally, I am very into heavy metal, so yeah, that's just kind of what I would end up doing. And I'm sure that not everybody enjoys heavy metal in the same way that I do, especially because I listen to the kind of heavy metal that people expect an apology for. Usually apologize by turning it up. But I figure that's kind of something that you guys can set up. Like if you want to listen to some music while watching me fiddle about with 3D printer stuff and forgetting to grab yet another tool that I need to get things sorted, then yeah, just get what you like. Progressive metal? Aw, yeah. Are you a fan of Periphery? They are a band that I have gotten very fond of. You know, now that I think about it, I just realized that my YouTube music playlist doesn't actually play any Periphery anymore. Wild. So because this is a 200 millimeter X rail going on a 200 millimeter extrusion, there's no offsets that you need to do. Just one's going to be probably just portions of a millimeter slightly longer than the other. Just center them. And with that, we are ready to actually put the XY joints on here. So on each side, we're going to have 2 on top, 1 on bottom. Tool, yeah, very, very good stuff. If you ever get a chance and you like the progressive metal, I really think you'd end up enjoying Periphery as well. So all we have to do here is decide which side we want to be the top. I'm going to just do the writing on my carriage as the top and slap 4 nuts in the top here, and then 2 nuts on the opposite side. And then the nice thing about the XY joints for Pandora is they actually fully capture the rail, so you don't have to worry about these nuts falling out as you're trying to get them started. So once you put both ends on, it doesn't matter. Polyphia. Polyphia. That sounds super familiar, but I am spacing. Was it Polyphia that had the song Goat? Or am I thinking somebody else? Goat? Yes. All right. Yeah, that song is absolutely insane. Just absolutely insane. Okay. So for the top and bottom here, we've got an M310 on each hole. So top, bottom, every single one of them uses an M310. I haven't actually heard a lot from Polyphia. Uh, I'm I, I don't know for certain, but I believe Goat was actually the first and only song that I have actually heard from them. Do me a favor, DM me on Discord so that I remember after the stream that I need to listen to more Polyphia. I think I went too far. All right, man, I am down. Just I might actually have to mute Discord just so I don't get distracted. running into an issue where this light is casting an insane shadow that I cannot see past. Shit. Go. There we go. Is this it? Is this the start? The Great Polyphia Blood? Alright. Now, something to keep in mind here is you don't want to over tighten anything going into the X extrusion while we're getting everything kind of pre-set up here to actually be put on the printer. The big reason is there's always going to be some amount of deviation between your parts and your extrusions and every other part of your printer, basically. So by leaving these somewhat loose and adjusting, basically just de-racking once you get this installed, that's going to give you the best possibility of having a good start with, and this isn't just for Pandora, this is for any printer that you build, or even any printer that you have to work on, because I've actually got some people that I work with that are into 3D printing, found out that I'm into 3D printing, and from talking with me have found out that I guess I know more than they do about 3D printing, which is a little wild to me, being that I just started into 3D printing this year. But yeah, I am affectionately known as the 3D printing doctor now. Okay, so those are a little bit loose, and we get to start. What printers do you not touch? Well, any printer that says no, because no means no, Liliana. Alright, so since we've already got these two started on this side in the front, let's go ahead and just start by getting those snugged down a little bit. And you do have to do kind of a side to side here, because if you go too far, you'll end up getting to a position where you can't actually get the head of the wrench in. Yeah, I think this is actually my biggest gripe about the gantry design as it sits. It just a little frustrating that it's this finicky to get installed. But the good news is, once these two are done, the other ones are pretty darn easy. And as long as you just go like a turn or two on each side and then swap to the other, it's easy. Okay. So that side is snug down. Now we need 6 more M2 button heads. So we'll go ahead and get these lined up for the most part. Now the back of the XY joints should be just about flush with the back of the actual bearing block. So that should make lining everything up for this part of the assembly a little bit easier. Okay, so now we've got front on both sides done. Now these holes in the top here next to the rear M325 were a recommendation by Zruncho to make sure that this was a little bit easier to put together as a little bit more of I guess a modular assembly. Previous iterations that actually the currently released Pandora gantry didn't have these, and you would actually have to install the the gantry or the x-axis part by part onto the printer itself. And I mean, it worked. You could do it, but it wasn't exactly very user friendly. So I finally yielded and decided that something that's a little bit more user friendly is probably a better idea. And here we are. Right, so now that we have everything else in place, we can go ahead and start tightening down XY joints to the extrusion. And I'm putting just a little bit of pressure towards the motor mounts just to make 100% certain that once everything is tight, that we aren't going to have any sort of racking issues. Okay. Right. Looks good, feels good. Gonna give him one last pass for the final snug. And I just realized that I never even finished the AB frame installation. So once we get this finished, we're going to just go ahead and go back to that, get the tensioners installed, which I'm particularly proud of for this design, both for form factor as well as just it's a unique design. I'm happy with it. Okay, so as I mentioned last stream, there are actually supposed to be some preloaded nuts on the inside of these extrusions. So we got the ones that were on the underside, we got the ones that were on the top side, but there was supposed to be a single nut preloaded on each side, on the inside of the extrusions. I didn't feel like taking the entire printer apart to fix that. Uh, for the build guide or for this stream, I probably should have, but I didn't, and I'm not sorry. So we are just going to go ahead and slide this preloaded X nut up so that we can get it started on the bottom of the drive frame. And this is an M38 as well. Yep, I missed. Line back up. And this time I'm going to start threading it with a screwdriver to start with. Wait, what the hell? Why are you not tightening? I'm pretty sure this is an M310 or M38. Double check here. M3x8. Do you not want to go? Huh. Okay. Let's go ahead, get this lined up again. Sure, we're lined up. Hmm. Am I using an outdated design again? I mean, I know I'm using an outdated design, but I didn't think, or I thought, I was using M38 there as well. Just for shits and giggles, let's try an M312. Nope, will not go. Will go without having the plastic guide. Hmm. This is potentially unfortunate. I do not believe this nut is properly threaded. Well, I guess that just gives me another reason to tear Pandora down again later. Because I am not letting that stop me this time. Right, so don't recommend that, but I forgot I ran into an issue with screw not working, and rather than tearing everything down and starting again right now, I'm just gonna kind of let it ride, and I'll come back to it later after the stream series or whatever you want to call it's done. Eight. When these Allen keys get magnetized. Yeah, that nut won't allow me to thread into it. So we are just going to bypass that for now and just keep on trucking. Okay. So this next part is the part that like I said, I'm super proud of. The design for the tensioners for the A and B drives. I mean, all it is a simple wedge, but it actually gives a decent amount of granularity to the tension that you're putting on your belts. So this is just M330. Um, though it's not included in the CAD, nor is it included in the BOM, I would recommend using a washer here. Doesn't have to be a shim. It doesn't have to be precision. Just enough to give a little bit of extra space for the screw that's going in here. So on the back here, you see where the screw will actually come out. And once fully inserted, it is possible that the screw could end up impacting the back panel. Now, that's taking into account the back panel being perfectly flush with the extrusions, uh, which won't be the case with the zero panels that we're going to be installing on this, but I wanted to make mention of that, as that is something to keep an eye on. And to finish up the AB mounts, we've just got the two drives, and this is where we get to reference that nifty little tool that was made. You know, now that I think about it, I think I got B and A backwards. Yep, pretty sure I got B and A backwards on this. Right, well, ignore that for the time being, and let's just keep on keeping on. Okay, so for the B drive, oh no, I got B and A right. Ah, did I? No. Did I? I don't know if I did. Nope, definitely got them backwards. All right, so for the B side, if you've already printed the tool, you want to use the A side and vice versa. But this will help make sure that your motor is pretty well aligned before you get to installing it. And of course, with the open frame design that the motor or the drive frames actually have, it would be extremely easy to adjust if need be. Okay, and then we will get everything ready for the A side. Just get that so it's touching. All right, got it snug. Got that snug. Oh. And I just stripped that. It'll do. So we won't need that until we start working on the Z-axis. And for each drive, we use an M3 or two M335s for the rear, and then two M310s for the front. And just like with the stock drive frames, we don't want to over tighten these because the drive itself is being used to tension the belts. So you just want these to be snug but not grossly over tightened. Okay. And then once you've got that, place here, I recommend backing out tensioner wedge until the drive is fully towards the outside of the machine. Oh, and I guess now that we've got the X rail installed, we could also go ahead and remove the rubber stops here, just to keep things clean. Ha! I installed this motor backwards. I've got the wiring heading towards the outside when it should be going towards the inside. Right, so let's go ahead and get that fixed. Alright, there we go. That's one of them actually fully installed. No redos. Okay. Now, once we get everything, like all of the parts fully installed for the gantry, which is actually now basically, uh, should we go ahead and just get the belting done for the gantry, or should we hold off on that and start working on the physical components for the bed? Do you guys want to see me fumble around with belts, or do you guys want to see me fumble around with more printed parts, basically? Nope, got those too tight. Inappropriate bed joke here. Yeah, see, that's why I said what I said about not touching printers. No means no. Yeah, who needs belts? All they do is keep your pants up and... Oh, different belt. Basically all I'm doing right here, in order to get the AB drives prepped, is I'm just backing the tensioning wedge out until I basically have nothing keeping it in. and then I just hold tension against the side of the motor and tighten down until I start to feel a little bit of motion there. You sound so much like a disappointed parent. Yes, I kind of feel that way when I'm talking to you most of the time. All right, so bed it is. Now, Liliana, I have a very important request for when the manual is in progress. I believe we've already discussed this, but I want to make sure that the very first thing that is done is I want to have the bed frame assembled. And I want to do this specifically because I want Nero to rage if he ever builds one of these on stream about putting the bed together so soon. Like, even before the frame is put together, I want to put together the bed frame, mount the bed to it, everything. And while I'm getting some parts together, I'm going to take a little bit of a nicotine break and caffeine break. All right. So this is all of the printed parts and non-fastener slash bearing hardware that we need. I've already installed all the Wagos. You don't necessarily have to use Wagos, but it definitely makes the wiring process a decent bit easier. Uh, for There's two for the end stop, two for the thermistor, and then three for the actual heating pad and thermal fuse. I installed an extra one here in the event that I want to install a fan. I could just piggyback off of the 24 volt provided to the bed and just use the signal pin for the fan to mount a fan to the bottom of the bed for uh, uh, like a convection effect. So the first thing that we really need to do is we need to get everything prepped to have the extrusions mounted here. So we are going to need, I believe it's two M3/8s for the back. Two M3/8s might actually be too long. It might be two M3/6s. Yeah, two M3/6s for the back, and then four M3/6s for the front. And we're just going to go ahead and pre-install everything here and get the nuts started on each of these, and then we're just going to slide the extrusion onto it. And you know, there are locking nuts mixed in with my regular hex nuts, and I cannot remember for the life of me why. I know they're there for a reason. Couldn't tell you what that reason is. Now, the nice thing about the way that this is designed, and this part here is courtesy of Z-Rancho, in addition to the zero panels, and zero click, and the top corners used for the box zero design. So uh, they're a very snug fit on button head cap screws. So you can put them in and none of them come out, at least not with actual pressure being applied to them. So if you ever need to adjust the bed for any reason, say you got it put in a little bit cockeyed, which we'll go over when we actually get to mounting the bed in the printer, you can actually loosen these a decent bit without concern of them just falling off or falling out into the depths of the printer and have to worry about hunting it out. So we take our 200 millimeter extrusion here, and we're going to find the prettiest side, and that side is going to be the front. So there we go. So just go ahead and line these up as I pass the extrusion over top of them. Get it roughly centered, and then just going to snug the outer two down. Not going to tighten them down because we're going to need to adjust these later. This bed? Oh no, it's a 120 bed. Like, it's the bed from my FormBot kit. The heating pad on here is 100 by 100. And then similarly, we're going to do the same with the back. Just line up the screws or the nuts as the extrusion passes over them. And it's important to note that this doesn't slide all the way to the front. Those are some added features for, I believe, Z-Rancho's Tri-Zero mod has the extrusion sitting a decent bit farther forward, but for this, it is, you only use these back two screws and it sits roughly this far away. And I don't have an exact measurement because I'm not really doing anything too crazy scientific or anything like that right now. Okay, so actually, before I forget, I almost forgot that there is a very important part that I need for the construction of the bed. The nozzle probe. At least until we get something like tap for the V0, we're going to need a nozzle probe. So let's go ahead and put that together. We've got a deflanged 20-tooth pulley, and just slot it in like you would for stock V2 or Trident end stop. And then I've got all kinds of hardware. I really should have ground a flat into this pin, but I don't care enough, and I really don't think that the printer is going to be upside down all that often. And especially with a potential for a tap for V0, I don't feel like just destroying a pin. Okay, so you want to make sure that the actual button for the trigger or for the end stop actually lines up with the hole. You can see, if I can orient it correctly, that it's slightly offset. So that means we want this button to be on that side as well. So putting them together, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. Lighting is terrible. There we go. Just barely be able to see the head of that button. And then you just screw it in with two M2 by 10 self tappers. There we go. Now, Liliana, one other thing that I wanted to make mention of is I prefer to not mention any sort of specific lengths for cabling or for like wiring, because not everybody will end up using the Wagos like I am. Some people will end up using some Wagos and not all of them. Uh, and people are going to have their electronics mounted in different locations, so it's going to be very difficult to actually recommend a specified length. Oh yeah, boop. They did say that it was coming. Oh man. So what's the process like to becoming a helper or a contributor again? Is that something that little old me could do? Uh, okay, so the front pieces here are definitely mounted with M3 by 8s. So I'm just going to go ahead and get those put through the body and have the nuts put onto the back here. And then we're going to go through the assembly of the actual kinematic mount for each of them. And I guess it's not a true kinematic mount, um, as they don't adjust according to temperature and expansion and contraction of the aluminum pieces, but they do a good enough job. So this is where we get into the installation of the GE5C bearings. And I'm actually really happy with the way that I was able to get everything sort of laid out for this. So in the back, there's a notch specific for an M5 nut. You take an M5 by 16 button head. Yes, it matters that it's a button head. And you just thread it in there. This doesn't have to be tight, but I do recommend getting it just a little snug. Just doing it with your fingers is enough. So there's one down. So applications for helping are closed right now while they restructure. That restructuring might mean that helping no longer has access to those projects. I'm not sure. Well, daggone it. Why you gotta tell me things like that? Make me sad. Contributor is just something they decide to give you when you're cool enough, I think. Well, I think I'm cool enough. I mean, I don't know if they do, but RCF likes this idea, at least. I mean, the printer, I don't know about making me a contributor. I don't know that I've actually contributed anything all that worthwhile to the Voron community yet. Okay, now once we have the GE5C and everything all set up here on the front mounts, just go ahead and get that snug down for both sides. And then we can move on to installing the actual in-stop. Okay, so we've got GE5Cs for both of these. Yeah, you're just annoying. That's your contribution. I agree. Okay, and I believe these are actually M3 20s? Are they supposed to be? I believe these are supposed to be M320s. Yes, and the reason I did that is because the original hardware was M318s, I believe. Hey, I mean, to be fair, you said it, not me. I just agreed with you. Are you really going to get mad at me for agreeing with you? Okay. And just like with the other parts, just get the nut started and then slide it into the extrusion. And you do actually want it to set just a little bit off the back. Don't worry, it's not going to impact the rear kinematic mount or anything like that. And this can be adjusted later, of course. So there we go. Nice and secure. And since we're here, why don't we just go ahead and get these wires out of the way so they're not just dangling all over the place. So flip up a couple of these Wagos, levers, feed in wire to the correct place, flip it down, and do the same for ground. Okay, so wires are now managed out of the way somewhat, and we can move on to the rear. I'm not gonna lie, I am very much still not happy with the design of this part. I'm still looking into ways that I can improve it, but so far this is what I've been able to come up with, and I really wanted to get this design out there so that I could have more people testing it, provide feedback and the like. And just like the front, you don't want this Hulk tight, you just want to get it snug, just with your hands should be more than enough, really. Okay, so more M38s. Go. And last one. And I suppose before I get this installed, I should probably go ahead and preload the M3 nuts that'll be used to actually hold the bed down. The only one that really matters that it's preloaded is the one from the back, and even then you can still get it loaded from the front, even if you already put the rear kinematic mount, whatever you want to call it, in place. All right, so now we just want to make sure that there is enough thread exposed that this is going to be able to slide onto the extrusion and just get it in there. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have preloaded those yet. I'll just go ahead and take that out for now. Make this a little bit easier on me. There we go. Hey, Z Runcho, how's it going, bud? I can't complain too awful much, man. Just hanging out. A little upset that the Voron Live wasn't for 0.2 or Mini Stealth Burner, but is what it is. I will say that I'm pretty excited for TAP. I really want to get my hands on it. Yes, I did. And if you give me just a second, get these screws somewhat, or these nuts somewhat installed, I can show you what ended up happening. So Z-Runcho's done a decent bit of work helping me with design ideas and feedback on existing ideas for the design. And so he's seen the CAD. And so this is probably going to make a little bit of extra sense to him. So do you remember how on the where the drive frames go into the extrusions, how they've got these little nubs that don't really want to show up on camera because angles are terrible? Anyway, those nubs are basically a positive friction fit, and they snap they snap the drive frame into the extrusion to get it in place. Yeah, they didn't snap in on that side when I was doing the stream last weekend, so that's the entire reason that they didn't want to go. So yeah, here we are. All right, so back to business. So I think just for my sanity's sake and keeping these wires out of my hair while I am doing this, I don't know if it's actually going to be easier to just go ahead and do... Nah, that'd probably just be too much of a headache. All right, so just like with the V2 and Trident, we're using these M4 thread knurled nuts. Now, if you really wanted to, you could use 8mm long brass bushings, or you could even print an 8mm standoff, though I would expect that to deform pretty quickly at 110C. If you are planning to print ABS in this printer. So let's see. Yep, got to drop the drive frames in if they're restrictive from the top. Yeah, I mean, you definitely could, but it's more the fact that I just wasn't paying attention whenever I was putting it together. I got one side to snap in all the way, but apparently the other side didn't snap in all the way like I thought it did. Let's see. I believe it's M312s that I need for this. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and reference the CAD just to be 100% on this one. And oh, M316. I'm glad I double checked. So 3 M316s. Just joined and my design looks identical to yours. I just updated the bed on the original T0 so it has new Wago bed frame. Trying to get that one printing again. Yeah, I just a little bit ago I was going over how you've contributed a decent bit to this design as far as designs just on the base level. Like I mentioned the bed frame, the top corners for the box zero design, uh, zero panels. I made sure to give credit where credit's due because I sure as hell didn't have the time to design all that. Okay, so now with these roughly in place, and falling out of place. Okay. So, I'm not gonna lie, there is very likely no way for me to make this look easy because I am still a terrible noob when it comes to building 3D printers. Yep, totally missed that. Hey, now that we've got two contributors here that I'm aware of, um, and Liliana, you guys should put in a good word for me because I want to be able to test all the fun things before it's released too. I like breaking things. I think I'm already on the right track. Stick around a little while longer. Yeah, I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. This has been extremely fun. I like working with my hands, and I like the designing aspects of the 3D printing, honestly, more than even building it. Uh, of course, I really enjoy being able to put together the designs that I make and actually see everything come for full circle. But I don't know. There's something just really fun to me about putting something together in 3D space and just watching it all come together. All right. Now, we have an octopus. Actually, it's Is that an octopus? No, there's only 7. Septopus? We have a septopus. Um, let's go ahead and flip up some levers on these Wagos and get this wiring mostly handled. Okay, there's one. Ooh. Get this one in there. Nope, that one did not go in. Okay. There we go. Alright, so which one of these... Okay, so this is going to be... input 24. So this one will be output for 24. And then this one is going to the bed for 24. And then this is the ground for the bed. There we go. So, it's not the best. Wire runs could be a little bit shorter, but for the most part, this is the bed assembly 100% done. Just got to throw... Can fit so much PEI on there. Okay. And yes, there's a pin. Goes right here. Not worried about that right now. Because while I don't plan on turning the printer upside down, that's after it's built and once it starts printing. This and where the printer's currently at, definitely going to be upside down a little bit. A lot of it. Okay, so I guess it would be time to start prepping the rest of the frame for the installation of Z stuff, I believe. Yeah. So just like with the Y rails, this is going to be our 4mm spacer to make sure that there's just the right amount of over travel on the linear rails. So, oh, want to slide the rail up, and this we can actually use this little nub to wedge into the extrusion and make sure that everything is nice and snug. And then just tighten everything down. And now that that's out of the way, we can remove the bottom little nub in there. And there's just the right amount of over travel. Do the same thing on the right side. After loosening these a little bit, because holy hell, those are tight. Why are those so tight? You know, after I get these rails done, I think I completely forgot to use the center spacers. Anyway, after I get these rails done, I think I'm going to go to the motors, just for the fact that they are probably the most overkill thing that I'm doing on this printer, and you do not have to do what I'm doing for the Z motors. I wanted to live in excess with this thing, because this is the first printer that I've ever fully designed, and let's be real, it's my baby. Alright, so get this back over here. Loosen these back up. That way we can put these in. There we go. And now we can remove the plastic nubber from the bottom of this one as well, because perfect amount of over travel. And last but not least, we have the rear. Okay. And I'm starting from the middle. I don't really think it's going to matter on this small of a scale, but just in general, whenever you are tightening bolts going into metal, there's going to be a possibility of deformation. So by starting in the middle and then working your way out in an alternating or spiraling pattern, you reduce the likelihood that the deformation is going to significantly impact the actual placement of the screw holes. And again, while it wouldn't necessarily matter for this particular sort of thing, it's just something that I've gotten into the habit of doing anytime that I'm putting anything together or what have you. Okay, so Z motors. There's 3 of them, and they're all MGN 17s. So I did say that I went overkill. I went with 3 of these. These are very overkill. I wanted to see if I could support the weight of the bed without any power to the motors. And these were the largest motors that I could find that would still fit within the confines of the design, so I went with it. Do the what was it? Tim the Toolman Taylor, more power. Oh, 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 oh. All right, there they are. So I also went ahead and got these really nifty black coated drives. Oh god, I think a grub screw just fell in my lap. Um, yep, I only see 3 up there, and there were 4. I'm pretty sure I've got extra grub screws. Hopefully I'm not giving you guys a good view of my crack right now. Oh, there we go. Okay, no, I was far enough back that you guys didn't get to see my crack. Shame. All right, and as mentioned, we have spacer built in here for the Z motors too. And I am particularly interested. You want your money back now? What money? You actually think that I'm worth anything? That you would have actually even thought to pay me anything? Grub screws have a nice Ferris flavor. Yeah, I'm not Nero. And yeah, thread locker, blah, 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 blah. I've not put thread locker on anything. I'm a terrible human being. I get it. Well, I guess my biggest concern is I don't want to blow anybody's eardrums out, and I don't know anything about audio control. So I'm just gonna not and say I did, and tell you that you don't have a leg to stand on to get your dollar back. Wait, you didn't even give me a dollar. Okay. Sure that this is snug, and then we can start torquing it down. Do the same thing here. Okay. On there. Right, and on to the last. Now, one thing that I am going to say is, unless Mini Stealth Burner ends up releasing before I actually get to the installation of the belts and the tool head, I'm just not gonna build that on stream. I mean, I'll mount it to the frame, but everybody here knows how to assemble Mini Afterburner, and that's the tool head that I'm sticking with for this build, at least for the time being. But there we have it. All three drives ready to go in the printer. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So two at the front, both use M310s. Actually, I believe they all use M310s. So I need a total of 10 M310s. Well, actually, as of right now, I only need 9 because the front foot got jacked up on this one. So I'll just go ahead and put this in. And unfortunately, I'm still waiting for the filament that I need to be able to reprint it. So there's that. You know, this would probably be easier if I just go ahead and flip the printer upside down. Okay. Right now, we've got the 2 screws holding this one in. As soon as my filament gets in, I will be remedying that situation with an additional or replacement. Apologies for the shot at the top of my head. Okay. Last screw for the front, and then we get to go ahead and install the back. This unfortunately does get a little bit cramped, mostly because I decided that the legs on this thing needed to be larger than the legs on a V2. Don't know what the hell I was thinking. But it works. Also, I'm pretty happy with the way that the design of the feet came out. So I really didn't want to try to shrink it down and ruin the aesthetic that I came up with. Screws trying to cross thread. Okay, there we go. It's at least started. Ah, heck. uh, I don't think that's going to matter that much. I actually set this, I had intended to set this up so that the wire for the motor would come in, would actually point out this side, but instead it's pointing out the top. But there's like 11 or 12 millimeters of space there that, yeah, that's just not going to matter. Okay. So this printer is starting to get heavier. Now, I would like to go ahead and get the rest of the Z joints installed, and I think after that we will call it for today, just as that'll let me mount the bed to something rather than just like sitting it inside the printer. Um, so let's go ahead, get that taken care of, and then we can just kind of call it there. Right. Actually, no, I can't. I cannot do that because part of the Z motion system, at least for the front, is that the belt is actually run through the actual carriage for the Z joint. So I don't think that there is anything else that we can do without getting into belting. And I think belting is just going to end up being held off until next week. Because I mean, putting panels on at this point would just be nonsense. Doing the electronics at this point, wouldn't be the worst, but I don't see it being a good idea. Just adding extra weight that doesn't need to be there for the time being. So yeah, I think that's going to be it for the stream here today. I appreciate everybody coming to hang out. Uh, what's blocking the belting? Oh, I mean, nothing's blocking me from doing belting. Um, I've just been going for 2.5 hours, and I think that's about my limit. 2.5, 3 is what I was going to be shooting for. But I think next week I'm going to come back and get everything ready for the belting for the Z drive, and everything is ready for the AB drives. And from there, it should be pretty quick as far as getting electronics set up. I've already got the controller set up. I've already got the controller all set up and ready to go, just as a part of testing things out um, over the week, this past week. So yeah, with any luck, we may be able to get this thing printing next week. And that may be still a little bit of a long shot. Ooh, actually, you know what? There is something that we can go ahead and install. This little jobby is what the belt for the bed mounts to. And it just goes right there. Well, screws will hold it in place, but it goes right there. And do I have M325s here? Is this what this is? Nope. M325. Yeah, planning on doing all of the belting next time. And yeah, like I said, hopefully I'll be able to have it pushing some plastic. Or, I mean, at least working on the calibration, like Z, like tramming and things like that. All right. So with that being installed, we're going to go ahead and call it. I appreciate you guys coming to hang out. If you have any questions, feel free to ping me in the Voron Design Discord. I'm also on the Doomcube Discord. There's a dedicated channel for my designs, and there's a thread for both this design as well as the Pandora Gantry, which is a basically the wider travel uh, that the Pandora's box design comes with, but in the same package that the uh, V0 is. So the only thing that you really need to do is replace some gantry parts, and you'll have a wider range of motion. But again, yeah, just thanks for coming to hang out. Let me know if you guys need anything, and yeah, take it easy.